Hello guys, this is me Simo Orohara, and in this video will be an answer to a discussion that some of you opened about me considering Ichigo's final Getsuga Tensho as his strongest mode. Some of you consider that after the revealing of Ichigo's power, Ichigo surpassed that mode of strength. Others even said that Ichigo's new Shikai became stronger than that mode. And I'm not agree with that saying. So before we dive in, please don't comment unless you have watched at least the half of this video. I know that my accent isn't that good, but you have the subtitles, and important, let's keep the comment section objective. Personally, I do not agree with this opinion, and I will explain my own point of view in this video. Why do I consider the final Getsuga Tensho to be the strongest transformation of Ichigo in the story? Of course, before I start answering, I have to make a very important statement. I'm not saying that Ichigo will never reach a stronger mode than the final Getsuga Tensho, but I do think that if the story had ended normally without any obstacles, we would have seen the final form of Ichigo's last power. I even dare say that the real Bankai that everyone is talking about would have been just a step towards the final mode of Ichigo in the end of the story. And I will talk about all these things in detail. So to tell you the reason why I said that Ichigo's final Getsuga Tensho is the strongest mode, I will start from 2 points. The first is Ichigo's power, and the second would be the technique itself, the final Getsuga Tensho, because the basis of that mode, in my opinion, is as follows: Ichigo Shinigami's power plus the technique itself equals the mode, because I consider that mode exceptional. It is separate from the modes of Ichigo's development as a power. That's to say, the fact that Ichigo used the final Getsuga Tensho in the middle of the story doesn't necessarily mean that his next transformation will be stronger than the final Getsuga Tensho. So let's talk about the Shinigami power of Ichigo, which is the first part in our equation. I see some people are still thinking that Ichigo was weak throughout the whole story until he went to the royal palace and discovered the mystery of the Osan Zangetsu. Then he became more powerful, where it appeared as if he gained a new power. This belief is fundamentally deficient. It is true that Ichigo became strong, but he was never weak, as we saw. Ichigo's problem was the same as Zaraki's. They both had a brutal Ryatsu from the start, but both of their powers were suppressed. As we notice, it was the Osan Zangetsu that was suppressing all of Ichigo's Shinigami powers. He was only allowed a certain amount to fight with. Why did the Osan do all this? The answer to this question will also be an answer to why the final Getsuga Tensho is the strongest, so I will answer this question later. The important thing is that Ichigo wasn't weak, and then he obtained a great power when he went to the royal palace. No, his power was only liberated and restricted officially through a new Zanpakuto form by Nimaya. The essential point in that matter was the Osan, meaning, and for example, if during Ichigo's training to control his Shinigami power in his fight with Kurosaki in the beginning of the Arankara arc, the Osan suddenly appeared and made an appeal to Ichigo and said, "I'm only your quincy power, and what you are looking at is your Shinigami power, and what he's saying is true. He is Zangetsu, not me, and I will now make you fight with all your strength." Ichigo's strength would have been on another level. Since the beginning of the Arankara arc, it may not be at the same level as the time when Nimaya formed his new Zanpakuto, but it would have been close to his new Shikai. The only difference would be the Zanpakuto form, because the original problem of Ichigo's power was that he was not in control. The Osan controlled his Shinigami powers. He wasn't allowed to take advantage of it properly. But wait, has the Osan allowed Ichigo to fight with all his Shinigami power before the chapter 542? Yes, he did partially, with Zaraki, then Byakuya, and against Elekura. There is no doubt that it allowed the passage of a large part of Ichigo's Shinigami powers, which transformed into the form of the Vasto Lord, to the point that the Osan had no more control on that tremendous power. That's why we saw how the real Zangetsu was the one who controlled Ichigo. So Ichigo was at another level of strength, but in a specific event, and in my opinion, the Osan did pass all of Ichigo's Shinigami power, without restriction, without repression. No, but more than that, the Osan also added his own strength as integral part of Ichigo's power. You will ask me when? I will tell you here in this scene. This scene, guys, I considered it a future sight of Ichigo's strength. When Ichigo was training for the final Getsuga Tensho, I'm almost certain that Ichigo has taken advantage of all his Shinigami powers that were suppressed inside him for the purpose of implementing this technique. In your opinion, who is this person? Why Tensa Zangetsu? Yes, but also this person is the real Zangetsu, the real power of Ichigo without restrictions. It's Shinigami power and Quincy power. His Shinigami power, and see how Kobo drew it at the Vasto Lord, the transformation that he used to fight Illiquora, plus the Quincy power of the Osan in his young form. Check out how the horn that formed on this creature and its eyes color. It's the same as Ichigo's form with the Bankai he released on Yohaba. Kobo wouldn't draw this similarity in vain. The shape of the white Tensa Zangetsu is the same as the real Bankai of Ichigo. Therefore, I'm almost sure that this form was the full power of Ichigo without restriction, and it was all passed to him after the latter accepted his sword as his real strength. And here I will return to a question that I asked in the beginning of this video. Why did the Osan suddenly decide to liberate all of Ichigo's Shinigami powers without restriction? And why was he originally suppressing it and making him fight with only a small portion? The reason was, according to the Osan himself, that he didn't want Ichigo to become a Shinigami. The Osan was trying with all his might to prevent Ichigo from walking to the path of a Shinigami. But at the Dangai training event, what would have happened after using the final Getsuga Tensho? Ichigo will lose all his Shinigami powers, and this was originally what the Osan wanted, Ichigo not becoming a Shinigami. So if he released all his Shinigami powers in order for him to learn and use this technique, then he will lose his powers. It would be a great for me as a Quincy power, and this is what I want. So what is the problem in allowing to Ichigo to free all his visible and invisible powers? I'm the one who will benefit from it, because Ichigo wouldn't be a Shinigami anymore. See, and the proof is that when Ichigo's Shinigami powers were back again in the Ginju arc, it was back almost the same way it was before the training for the final Getsuga Tensho, with only a slight increase in shape because of the Fullbring. In other words, the Osan was back suppressing his power again. So now I have provided the data that confirms, in my opinion, that Ichigo's full Shinigami powers were passed to him by the Osan in the Dangai training. We will now talk about the second side of our equation, the final Getsuga Tensho technique itself. I frankly don't know why some people ignore the fact that the technique itself has a condition and limitations, will surely give you a superstitious power alongside the power you possesses. If we wanted to compare from a general perspective, it's a bit close to Gon vs Pito in Hunter x Hunter. Gon sacrificed something in order to get that amazing amount of power that made Pito look like a real ant in front of him. And it is indifferent to Ichigo, who already possesses great powers, as we explained, plus the technique itself. Plus we don't really know the secret behind this technique. Is it specific to the Shiba clan? Is it specific to the Zangetsu Zanpakuto and Isshin's Zanpakuto Injitsu? Mystery surrounds this technique, and what it can give you. Is it a post-Bankai phase, so that in this phase you represent the technique itself? And the fact that Ishin knows this technique remains a mysterious. The important thing is that I think that the powers that this technique gives you should not be neglected, plus Ichigo's powers. All of these ingredients came together and gave us that legendary phase at the end. Some will say that the technique was not activated until the moment Ichigo released it. But in my personal opinion, the process of entering into that phase is activated as soon as you receive your Zanpakuto stab. After that, you immediately get into the process of implementing the technique. If you notice, Ichigo's Zanpakuto chains were wrapped around Ichigo's right arm, and his hand also had a glove with a Zanpakuto handle on it. These are all indications that Ichigo's had already entered the stage of the final Getsuga Tensho. And for the technique ritual to be completed, he must activate it as we saw. Now to conclude my opinion on this matter, and the juice for everything I said since the beginning of this video, my personal opinion is the final Getsuga Tensho combined both Ichigo's powers and the powers of the technique itself, the thing that got Ichigo a tremendous amount of Reiatsu that no one could sense. At first, Aizen tried to find an explanation for it by linking it to Ichigo throwing away his Reiatsu in order to gain that physical strength, because Aizen tried to explain why Ichigo had all that strength by suddenly holding him, flying with him, and throwing him like insects. But in the end, Aizen knew the bitter truth, that Ichigo was another dimension of power, and Kobo confirmed this by drawing the Tatsuki scene when she says the same thing, that she feels the power of Aizen, but she no longer feels anything from Ichigo. The Reiatsu that Ichigo had at that point was able to scrap any technique and anything. Hado 90 from Aizen Butterfly, Ichigo break it like a weak glass box, and to take Aizen's sword with one touch of your hands. These are all indications of how strong this phase is, how strong Ichigo is when he is at full strength alongside with the power of the technique itself. Believe me, no matter how weak Aizen the Butterfly is compared to Yhwach, to not feel Ichigo's Reiatsu is a sufficient evidence to explain the extent of Ichigo's strength at that moment. I cannot accept the idea that Ichigo's new Shikai may be stronger than this stage, because Ichigo's new Shikai was nothing but the opening of his powers in a new way. If the Dangai Ichigo had been in the last arc, he would have never even allowed Asukin to get close to him. With the special Reiatsu that he had at that moment, he would have nullified the poison powers that Asukin had. Some would say, but Yhwach said that Ichigo was stronger than before. I personally did not see this anywhere. He was just talking about the fact that Ichigo reached the point he wanted, which was to cut the King of Souls. Even his speech scenario enters as a failed attempt to imitate Aizen, that he too was blind for Ichigo since his birth and attempted to manipulate him as Aizen and Genju did in the past. The only thing that Yhwach had in the fact that Masaki is of his own race, and Yhwach was talking as if the quincy powers were the source of his strength, where we see the opposite, that Ichigo's shinigami powers was the power that saved him many times. What it must be taken in consideration that the final Getsuga Tensho, as I said in the beginning of this video, is something special, something separate from the stages of Ichigo's evolution in strength, because even after he got acquainted with his powers and got a new Zanpakuto, Ichigo still had to train so that he could control his powers, and he confirmed it. The sad thing about it is that we didn't see Ichigo's full power. The battle between Ichigo and Yhwach happened only 10 chapters before the manga ended. We all agree that the end of Bleach and the battle wasn't good, whether it was because of Kobo's desires or something else. From the last 30 chapters, from the beginning of the speedy release of Bankais of Zaraki and Toshiro, all the way to Ichigo was happening in a complete chaos and great speed, so much that Kobo was not even able to show Ichigo's new Bankai. I might even say that even releasing Ichigo's new Bankai wouldn't be enough to finish Yhwach. Kobo was originally working at light speed, was drawing anything to reach an end. If the Bankai was revealed, he would have to write other chapters, and the magazine and Kobo had already set a timeline for the manga to end. I mean, the easy thing is to write a bubble for Yhwach to say words about his fear of Ichigo's Bankai, because if the Bankai was really able to finish Yhwach, Kobo would have found a way for Ichigo to launch the Bankai, beat Yhwach, and the end of the story. At least we could have seen the Bankai, but he didn't. And I think because the Bankai wouldn't be able to finish Yhwach to begin with. Finally, I think that Ichigo's Bankai wouldn't have been his last development to defeat Yhwach. You remember that in 2010, Kobo had made a complete plan for Bleach to last another 10 years, meaning until 2020, which means that if we suppose that everything went as Kobo planned, I don't think that Ichigo's Bankai would be the thing that the story would end by. It's true that the new Bankai would be on another level of power, but do you really think that a Bankai is enough to defeat Yhwach? We talk about Yhwach that have unimaginable powers and techniques. This is what I will be discussing in the second part in my next video. Ichigo and his real strength and how should have been manifested in the last arc and how the last battle would have been. So see you guys in my next video.